Welcome to Coaching in Session,
where limits end and growth begins.
Hosted by Michael Rearden.
This is your space to challenge the ordinary,
unlock your potential,
and step boldly into your next chapter.
Your mindset journey continues.
Welcome, Allyson Hurley, to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for coming on. Today, we're going to be talking about your work. You are a certified personal trainer and nutrition coach. And this is something where I'm sure the audience members are going to be extremely interested in, because they might have their paradigm set out for the new year and they're like, okay, I know what I'm going to do. They might have found some recipes on Google or Pinterest and they're like, I'm excited to try this out. But then they partake their meals and they're gaining weight or something's happening in their life, and just like, what's happening? And one of the reasons is that they don't know their body. Maybe their body has changed, or maybe they have never truly paid attention in nutrition class when it was personal wellness time in high school. So there could be a whole array of issues happening. But the work that you do are going to be helping people understand themselves and their diet. And I'm just going to be, passing the baton to you right now to kind of give us some insight on who you are, what you do, and of course, how you help people.
Yeah, thank you. So like you mentioned, I'm a personal trainer and also a nutrition coach. I've been in business for about 2.5 years thus far. And I really got into this work because, for lack of a better phrase, I did everything wrong first. So for about 10 years, I was significantly undereating, overexercising, kind of always wondering why I wasn't seeing the results on the scale that I really wanted to. And it was during 2020, the pandemic, where I really had an opportunity to kind of slow myself down and take a look at what I was doing to myself and realize that, it didn't have to be that hard, and healed my relationship with food. And through that, I became very passionate for helping other people understand that it also doesn't have to be so hard, and that we can heal our relationship with food, and through that have better outcomes in our aesthetic goals or just overall wellness. So we're not so just concerned about being around food and exercise.
Very true. I think of what you said, people, they undereat and they overexercise, and it seems like that would be a good problem to have. Why is it not?
So when you don't give yourself enough fuel, there's something called metabolic adaptation that can happen, and people will confuse this with starvation mode. Now, starvation mode is a myth. It's not true. That's the idea that when you undereat, your body kind of holds on to body fat and you can't lose any weight. But what's really happening is metabolic adaptation. So, for example, at that time, I was eating, I'm just going to throw a number, it was like 1,600 calories roughly. But I was also running 5 to 6 days a week because I was a runner back then. I wasn't lifting heavy weights by any means. And so when we do that and we have our activity ramped up, what we're doing is really kind of slowing our metabolism. I could have lost weight at those calories, but it was just very, very slow. So it's really important to make sure that we kind of maintain our metabolism in a good spot. We're lifting weights, we're building muscle. That's another piece of it too. When you're doing a lot of cardio, you can get really hungry. If anyone's a runner, they know they can get super hungry when you're training for a marathon, half marathon, whatever it may be. So shifting to kind of more weightlifting while incorporating a little bit of cardio can be really helpful.
Yeah, I remember when I was in, I think it was college, and I would do 2 times a day going to the gym. So in the morning would be weightlifting, weight training, and then in the evening would be all cardio. And after the cardio sessions, we always had to eat because we were just starving. Even though it was later in the evening, it's like 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. We're like, we have to eat, otherwise we're just going to be a wreck. And even though we sometimes ate, just on the cusp of like that 3-hour window before bed, we didn't gain any weight. It was just because our body was craving the fuel. And I know there's so many myths when it comes to dieting or nutrition, or maybe even going to the gym. For example, being in a calorie deficit is a good thing. Maybe if you want to be part of the fad diets, but then we can look at what our body needs as fuel on the other part. So we're giving our body what it needs, rather than we're just kind of playing a guessing game and saying, okay, well, I don't know what I'm eating or what I should be eating. We'll just see what happens down the road in a week or a month. And then when that happens, typically people are like, I'm not seeing the results. And so there's so many myths, and I wanted to debunk some of the myths that are very common for people to partake in or just be told when they're starting off on their nutrition journey?
Oh gosh. Number one, right off the bat, is that carbs will make you gain weight. They might make you gain weight on the scale, right? Because carbs hold water in our body, but they are not inherently bad. They get a really bad rap because they're what's in all like the really good foods, candy and sweets and chips and all the things, but they're not inherently bad. We can include carbs in our diet. In fact, if you're for both, whether you're doing cardio, running, or also weightlifting, you really want to make sure you're including some good carbs. Like I'm a big fan of just straight potatoes. And I know for somebody who's had that myth of carbs are bad, like to hear that is like, what? No way. But that's one certainly right off the bat. And with that too, that we need to cut out any foods. You often see that a lot when people are like, I'm ready to go on a diet. It's like they treat it like a switch and all of a sudden they're saying no to all of these things that they really kind of want. They go and for a few weeks, they're really good and they don't eat these certain foods. But then because we're resisting them, what happens when we're around them again? We just are crazy for them and we can't really control ourselves because we've been resisting it. So it makes sense why we do that. It's definitely a behavior thing. But I would say myth number one is that carbs are bad. And myth number two is that we have to cut out certain foods out of our diet.
Yeah, very true. I forget who it was. It was a bodybuilder and he was eating McDonald's every single day as like to prove a point. And even though his insides were all messed up aesthetically, he was still getting the results that he was looking for. He was bulking up in the gym and he was getting the size and the mass and eventually had to get heart surgery or something because there was like a block, like there was too much cholesterol from all the food he was eating. So it was like a double-edged like sword there. He was proving a point that he can eat this food and still get results, but then it had an internal effect on the body. And I wanted to talk about that idea of how foods can not only affect us on the outside, but on the inside.
Yeah. So I want to touch on the McDonald's thing just for a second because my husband and I like to like go on McDonald's dates every now and then. And I've been in a deficit and gone to McDonald's. And kind of like when you said about what it can do in your body, you know, figuring out what we can eat that makes us feel our best is important without the concern for maybe calories or whether or not it's going to make me gain weight. Like if someone has that belief system around carbs, they might be really scared to eat carbs. And here it makes them feel great. Whereas maybe somebody who's cut it out eats it again and they have a gluten intolerance and it doesn't feel good. So we don't eat that. But I think it's giving yourself the opportunity to try different things. Of course, whole foods are going to be the best thing for you, but I'm a big proponent of eating everything. We can fit everything in moderation into our diets, and having more of what helps us feel our best is key, while also having the other stuff that maybe gives us joy is good to keep in our diet too. It's both physical and I think mental a lot too.
What is your go-to order when you go out with your husband to McDonald's?
So, I would say like a 4 to 6 piece chicken McNugget and a small fry.
Okay.
Maybe sometimes ice cream.
All right.
But yeah.
Okay. Their ice cream is really good. I remember. I haven't had a McDonald's in years, probably a decade or more. And it's not that I wouldn't eat McDonald's. It's just that the lifestyle that I guess I'm living, it just doesn't fit it in. Now, I will still go get a burger and things like that. I don't hate McDonald's or Burger King or Taco Bell. They're all viable options. I think you just have to figure out what do you want to eat. For example, I'm not a big seafood guy. And so I don't eat a lot of seafood. And plus, I'm in Central Texas right now. I used to live in Connecticut, which makes sense. You can go to Maine and get some nice lobsters. But in Central Texas, you're not going to get that much fresh fish. Or seafood. So, I'm not that big. My wife is, though. So it's like she has to be very selective in restaurants when she's ordering seafood here. Versus if she's over in New England, we go visit my parents, she can order anything on that menu. So there's going to be preferences. And I know there's a big diet that's popular. I don't know if it's still popular. It's called the carnivore diet. I'm sure you know all about it. And people will say, okay, well, I can only eat meat. And they have, of course, some carbs, like some potatoes and things like that when they're needing it. But most of it is they just have a steak or some skirt steak or something like that. So it's just super simple with some broccoli. And even though that diet is super simple and it's effective, how are the long-term benefits of doing something that is like a fad diet, like keto or like paleo or like the carnivore?
Long-term benefits of a fad diet.
Or not benefits.
I mean, I don't know if there really is a true benefit. I mean, like you said, with preference, right?
Right.
I'm not gonna knock what someone's doing, but definitely with the carnivore diet in particular, however, that one with the amount of, I should say, lack thereof, fiber somebody's getting, that is always concerning. I think about kind of those core things that you want to continue to get in your diet, whether you're doing keto or carnivore, and that's your fruits, your vegetables, your grains, and your protein, and also making sure you're getting your fiber. So when I think about these fad diets, they should include all food groups, but when they're fad, they typically don't, right? We notice that. Like they always kind of cut one thing out and they go to the extreme. Keto, it's absolutely no carbs or very, very small amount of carbs, but you can have as much fat and protein as you want. Carnivore, it's eat whatever meat you want. And it's like, if we just kind of come back to the middle, right? Any extremes aren't really great. If we can just be in the middle somewhere, that's really where we need to be. We don't need to go way one side or way the other side. So I think if it's something you like to do, you do you. But in terms of true health benefits, there really aren't any fad diets that stand out above the other. And one thing I do like to share with my clients when I work with them, and if they're struggling with maybe carb intake or historically have done keto, is that we know from a research standpoint that if you take somebody who they're eating the same amount of the same amount of calories and protein, and one's low carb and maybe one's low fat, they are the same across the board in terms of weight loss. So if the goal is weight loss, really it's protein. Protein is queen, calories are king. That's what I always say. So what you decide to do with that, beyond that information, is preference, really.
You brought up the idea of goals with our nutrition. So we can have a goal for weight loss. We can maybe have a goal for less brain fog in our life. So we're maybe a bit more focused, a healthier mind, maybe. So, with this idea of a goal, I'm sure people are thinking about goals that they have for themselves and their bodies. How do you help people with their specific goals? So we can be very specific. So if someone wants to work on weight loss, but then they also want to build muscle. Now, it's going to be difficult maybe to do both at the same time, especially if they had to lose a lot of weight. If it's marginal amount of weight, then possibly it can happen at the same time. But if they have a goal for losing weight and bulking up, what would maybe session one be when they're working with you or are reaching out to you?
Sure. So first, it would be kind of getting down to those behavior-based goals. So when I have a client come to me and their goal is to lose X amount of pounds or gain X amount of muscle or whatever it is, that's really an outcome to our behaviors. That's kind of that long-term goal, if you will. So I'll just use the example of 20-pound weight loss, for example. If I have a client who comes to me and their goal is to lose 20 pounds, we take that and we table it, because we know that's where we want to go, but that's not going to create the roadmap of how we get there. So then we'll focus on some behavior-based goals. So that might get down to, what does your nutrition look like currently? And from there, either making those small adjustments that we can, and of course, giving them kind of a roadmap in terms of their fitness plans too, because there's so much variation with it. If you have somebody who wants to lose like a certain amount of weight, they could be somebody who's been working out already 6 days a week. They could be someone who's never been working out. So it's really kind of taking where they want to go and where they're currently at and filling that gap with behavior-based goals. And when I talk about behavior-based goals, what I'm referencing is, I'm gonna walk 7,000 steps a day, or I'm going to work out 3 times a week. I'm going to get X amount of vegetables in. We really focus on kind of those things that are actually going to get you to that outcome.
So there's not going to be a focus on limitations at this point. It's just going to be looking at what we can add to our regimen versus take away.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. And I think that's part of the reason why people get so frustrated if they have a weight loss goal or something, is because they're looking at the outcome and they're not looking at kind of those small behaviors that they need to do to get to the outcome. So we might be focusing on maybe the scale. And when we're not getting the feedback that we want from the scale on a daily basis or even a weekly basis, we get frustrated, but we can't really control necessarily what that does. But we can control the other things, but when we work out, what we eat, those sorts of things. So when we can shift that to a behavior-based goal, it also helps people be more compliant because they're excited, right? Like they can do it, they're doing well. It gives them something else to look at than just this number on the scale.
I've worked in mindset for quite a bit. And when you give yourself a negative, it's like that's the glue to your conscious and subconscious. It's just there. So I might say, okay, you can't eat hamburgers, you can't eat cake, you can't eat fast food. So all of these negative things that are like, oh, I can't do this. And even though you are going to be implementing the good behaviors and say, okay, I'm going to eat more vegetables, I'm going to do some more steps. So you're doing these things. Still in the back of that mind is that tick of, I can't do this. And it's like so human to say, I want to be free. I want to be able to do what I want to do. And as much as I would love for people to, jolt their mind and get some good mindset, it's like you don't have to say that like you can't have something. It's just instead of having it every night, maybe you have it once a week or something like that, or once a month. So you just train your mind to say, I can still have these things, but I'm just doing how I'm proceeding to how I get them differently, because it's easy, or I guess it's maybe habitual, or maybe it's a routine for someone to get off work and to go to a restaurant to get some food or to get some DoorDash, because we're all busy. Everyone has a lot of responsibilities, and they can have kids, or they can have, something that popped up in their life where they need something quick. Not everyone's going to be able to meal prep or to get these meals from online or something like that, because maybe they cost a little bit more than if you were to go to McDonald's or something. So there's a lot of factors for how can someone consume food, whether it be going out getting fast food because maybe it's more economical at the time, maybe it's signing up for a meal prep system, or maybe going to the grocery store and practicing your cooking skills if you don't know how to cook well. Which is your preference when you're working with someone? Is there a preference, or do you say just do what you feel comfortable with, or basically in the mindset of like, do what's not going to harm you?
Yeah, my preference is just always for sure add in and not subtract. I always think about, if you're somebody who wants the sweet treat after every meal, great. Then how can we make the other portions of that meal really high nutrient dense food, so it's paired together with something and you're not just eating maybe the candy or the treat and now you're hungry 2 hours later. It's making sure we're adding in. And I appreciate that you bring that up too, is because everybody has a different lifestyle. They have a different life. There are different levels of busyness in this world. And one thing I'm really passionate about is making sure that I'm helping people with where they're at, because there are also themes out there that kind of shame us if we go out to eat or if we have to go through a drive-through. And at the end of the day, my goal is long-term sustainability, not these quick fixes. I could tell anybody just to quit going through the drive-through and always cook from home. But if you're somebody who has, if you're a single mother who has 3 kids and you're running back and forth, to say that to you is so out of touch a little bit, to be blunt. So in terms of a preference, my thing is always just like, how can we add, if you have an opportunity to try out swaps, what would that look like? If you really like burgers, maybe we don't do the 80% lean ground beef, maybe it's the 93. So it's just figuring out where somebody's at, what their preference is, and making it those small adjustments that they can manage.
Yeah, we have a wide breadth of audience here. It can be from 18 all the way until in like 63, I think it's around there. So like there's a wide breadth of things happening, and not only in their body, but their lifestyles and their mind too. Because an 18-year-old definitely in that college life, and they're just going out, maybe partying, getting fast food with friends, drinking. And when you're young, your body can keep up with how much harm you're doing to it. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, when you get maybe into your mid-20s, your body starts to say, okay, all right, let's figure something out. Otherwise, we're going downhill from here. For me, it was around 28 where I noticed like I couldn't just eat rice anymore because I'm Puerto Rican. And I would eat literally like a pound of rice a day. It was just like so much rice. And then I put beans on top of it. So carb on top of carb. And then I'll have some meat with chicken, pork chops, steak, or something like that, right? And that was it. And it was very little vegetables, sometimes green beans or broccoli, but it was just rice beans, plantains was what people I think will understand instead of plátanos, and then some level of meat, right? So my diet, my diet when I was younger was definitely out of whack, out of balance. And even though I was able to outwork anything that I was doing until 28. And then it was just like, wait, what happened to me? It's like I was doing all the things right. I was doing everything that I was doing when I was 15, 16, 17, 18. And then all of a sudden, everything that I had been doing is just not working. And it wasn't until I got specific in what types of food I was eating, and then also learning about how foods were affecting me, because I found that if I eat certain types of pasta, it had a negative effect on me, not only on my mind, but also on my body. So is there a way for someone to figure out what foods are helpful to themselves, like a test, like a genetic test, or is it more of a trial and error system?
I think it's more of a trial and error system, because I know that there are tests out there that you can take for like certain intolerances, but those tests require you to eat whatever it is you think you're intolerant of. So I don't know what they're called, forgive me, but I think you're shaking your head, what they are specifically. Now I talk about with my clients, typically it's just trial and error. So a lot of times if I have somebody who's been coming to me who has been significantly under eating and we have to reverse their calories back up, I always tell them, like, this is the fun time. Like, we got to bring those foods back in, figure it out. We all have food rules, I call them. And I feel like it's different if you have a food rule that is because you fear weight gain or because you want to look a certain way versus the food rule because it doesn't feel good. Like, that's okay. So I think it's just making sure people are looking at it from a very, gosh, I'm totally drawing a blank on the word, but just a very strict, this doesn't make me feel my best.
Should someone be focusing on macros, or they should just be focusing on intuitive eating, or maybe getting a scale and making sure everything's an appropriate amount of weight, that they are saying, okay, I'm eating 10 grams of meat every hour or something like that, or I'm eating 100 grams of rice, and then I'm eating 55 grams of chicken. Like, does it have to be that specific? Because I know when it comes to like bodybuilders, they love their scales. And even when I was, transitioning and figuring out foods, I bought 2 scales. Okay. I wasn't playing around. So I had 2 scales and I was using both at the same time. I was like, all right, I got my rice, I got my chicken, and I was meal prepping, and I had a freezer full of food, and I was, again, super good shape. And people were like, oh my goodness, how are you doing this? And this, like, in my mind, it's like, I didn't know how I did it. It was just like, okay, I was just doing trial and error, and I figured out what worked for me. But then if I had to do that or help someone else, it would be more challenging for me to say, okay, well, we have to do trial and error system and figure out what works for you. And so, like, if I don't know if you found a way where you can really help people saying, okay, well, I found maybe focusing on macros or weighing out our food is, can be helpful, or just, intuitive eating, slowing down while you eat. And when you start to feel full, maybe take a step back.
Yeah. I do all the things. So I think there is a spectrum that I exist on when it comes to working with clients. So if I have somebody who maybe they're not in a place where tracking their food would be the most healthy for their mindset, then we'll focus on intuitive eating. There are other ways to kind of measure your food. There's a hand portion scale, just using your hand, all the way up to weighing and measuring your food, because I do think there's value in that. And I kind of view it like, if I have a destination, if my destination is weight loss, it's going to be quicker if I take the interstate in a car on a paved road, but I could take a horse and buggy on a dirt road. And so it just kind of depends on, which one you want to take and where you want to go. And again, what's best for you. It sounds so silly because I feel like all my answers are, it depends. But it depends on kind of the individual we're working with. If I'm working with a bodybuilder and they got a show, let me tell you, we're doing scale and we're weighing and we're doing all those things. But if I'm just working with somebody who is looking to improve basic nutrition skills, and they're not really interested in any crazy aesthetic goals, then we'll focus on intuitive eating.
Yeah, it's important, because I think what happens into the minds of people who have a destination of weight loss, or just of maybe even instead of calling it weight loss, they want to fit in a certain type of clothes, or they want to have a certain type of waistline, even though it's all considered weight loss. They give themselves just a different way of being. And I think of like people who get ready for weddings. where they're like, oh, I have to be able to fit into my dress. And it's so funny. Someone was just talking about this. They're like, if you eat too much, you're not going to be able to fit in your wedding dress, because the wedding was a little bit later. It was like 9 months away. And, she was eating, stress eating. And she was like, oh, wait, I'm not going to fit in my dress. So now she's super worried about not being able to fit into her dress. So there's two systems there. One is like, I can't eat what I want to eat, otherwise I can't get married or fit in my wedding dress. And then the other one is, I just have to survive for 9 months so I can fit in my wedding dress, and then I can eat what I want. How dangerous are those two mindsets, or is that way of thinking for someone that I only want to do something for a moment or for a period of time rather than making it a lifestyle?
I just think that, I always go back to the question of, why is it important for you to lose weight? And when it comes to whether it's an event like that, where it's your wedding, why is it important for you to look a certain way? And really diving deep into kind of the rationale behind the choices, because sometimes it could be as simple as, I just want to look good, or
Right.
whatever it is. And it could be something deeper, like, I want to, I've never felt pretty in my life, and I just want to have this one day where I feel really pretty. And so then those are two different things too. So kind of navigating around the why behind weight loss to begin with, I think is really important. And there are always going to be likely events in our life that maybe we want to look a little better in, but there can be healthy ways to get there and unsustainable ways. So for the person who wants to maybe lose some weight for their wedding, the question is this just for your wedding, or is it something you want to sustain long term? Because then, those are kind of two different plans again, but really honing in first and foremost on the why, I would say, is the most important.
I couldn't imagine someone not wanting the sustain factor, because long term they're going to feel amazing. Like, think about it. Like, if that bride was like, I want to look beautiful on this day, right? This one day, why not give yourself the mindset of, I want to look beautiful every single day?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that it's just more difficult for someone to follow a diet longer term, or maybe the fact is that maybe they get burnt out from watching what they're eating or consuming, and they just want to kind of not worry about their nutrition for a bit?
Yeah. Well, first, those two questions with, is this something you want to have long term, or is it just for your wedding day? I have a feeling they're going to say long term. And so I think about like that developing discrepancy piece of working with a client, where we want to make sure. So if you want to have this be long term, then this is kind of the direction we have to take things, right? So we're not doing these absolutely extreme measures to get to that. And so I think as I would work with somebody in that circumstance, if we were kind of seeing maybe not the outcome this person wanted, halfway in, then again, kind of bringing that back to, this is a sustained thing. You might not reach your destination there, but you're going to reach your destination beyond your wedding, and really focusing on making sure that they understand that they're going to still get their goal. But it might just not be, it might not be there if it's sustainable. Because like you said, people might need a diet break. If we're in a deficit for 9 months, that can be exhausting, depending on how much body weight you have to lose or you want to lose. And a sustainable plan includes breaks and being realistic with ourselves. And if we're struggling in a deficit, and when I say struggling too, I think of those things that we tend to shame ourselves for, like, I keep overeating, or I'm just so hungry and I go overboard every day. It's like, that's your body saying, get me out of this deficit right now. So not shaming ourselves, like, I just have to double down on my restriction. It's like, no, you actually have to probably increase your calories and give yourself a break for a little bit.
All this is interesting, because when someone is on that road to getting the body that they dream of, or weight loss, and that's their destination, they give themselves this hopeful idea that they can do it. And then maybe halfway on that journey, they might be seeing the results, but maybe it's not so serious where they're like night and day, where they're like, oh man, it was so difficult this first 3 months or first 6 months, and I have to keep on going because I'm only halfway there. And for them to look at how far they have left versus how much they have gone can be, daunting for someone. What's your way to encourage people to keep on with their diet and to keep on with, with their nutrition plans?
I think it's highlighting the progress that they have made. And not only just with any sort of body changes, but also with habits they've been consistent with or introduced. Certainly with strength training, you're going to build muscle. You're going to be adding weight when you're adding heavier weights when you're lifting. So those things, highlighting those really positive things and shifting away from maybe that scale talk all of the time is really, really important to keep motivation strong. And we live in a world, the sad thing is we live in a world where there are these 30-day body transformations. So we think that we're going to just have this like super extreme diet. Everything's going to be great. It's been really easy. And in 30 days, I'm going to have the body of my dreams. And unfortunately, it takes longer than that. And that can be really hard to accept. But having realistic expectations is really, really important. And that's something I talk about too with my clients about moving into if it's a fat loss phase and it's going to take some time, just having realistic expectations. And I think that's part of the reason why we as a society really struggle with diet and exercise is because we see those 30-day changes or those extreme measures and we're like, I want that. But that's not how you keep it forever, you know?
Yeah, I think of if we look at society and culture, one of the things we can see is if someone is in shape or someone's out of shape. And we can readily see out of shape people more than maybe in shape people. It's very similar, I think, to the idea of if you think about a Toyota, just like throughout your day, maybe you want to buy a Toyota. When you're driving, you're going to see Toyotas. You're going to be paying attention to that. The same thing with Mercedes. Maybe you want to get a Mercedes. And all of a sudden, you're going to see all these Mercedes driving. And it's just like, where did all these Mercedes come? Well, the reality was they were always there. It's just that we're tuning our mind to focus on those things. So sometimes when people think of society or culture, they just like, well, everyone is this way. So everyone's a little bit chubby and this is the new normal. I'm not going to be anorexic. And so they give themselves these ideas for these words of they don't want to be super skinny or they don't want to be super big. And so they struggle with their identity or their appearance identity because it's not truly theirs. It might be from an external stimulus of what they see around them. Because we can look at people like, these are stars. We can look at Adele. She had lost a lot of weight. And you know what happened when she lost a lot of weight? You would think the environment around her would be nurturing. It's like, oh my goodness, Adele, I love you. People were mad at her. I can't believe she lost all this weight. And it was because maybe at some point they said, oh, well, she's this big, I'm this big, I can accept it. I can accept my size, but the fact that she wants to work now is a problem for me. We can look at people like Ariana Grande, where she's like super conscious about what she eats. And then so we can look at, oh, she's not eating enough. And because maybe there's, she's skinnier than them. So it's like everyone has these preconceptions of what someone should be doing. How can someone train themselves to not look on the environment around them, but rather what they want to create?
I just have to say something about that Adele. So I loved when she lost the weight because I remember her doing an interview, like basically saying, hey, I might gain it back because I'm not working out as much as I am anymore. And I'm going, so I just loved her approach to it because it was like, yeah, I did this and bodies change all the time. So I think making sure that we can kind of turn it into ourselves is focusing again on really what we are doing. And I do think it depends kind of where a person is at, because like you said, there's society. There's also how we grew up. Sometimes we hear our mother's voice in our heads and it's not our own. So it's really figuring out, like, if you're having negative self-talk, where is that coming from? And so one of the approaches that I like to work with my clients is on their negative self-talk is identifying either whether that is a true thought or not a true thought, where it comes from, how it's impacting their behavior. If it's true, like I think about what evidence do you have to really support that this is even true? When you talk about kind of celebrities and our preconceived notions, like those are stories we tell ourselves. We don't know these people. We just make this assumption about them. And that can be based on our own feelings about ourselves, right? So really getting to know yourself really well and your thoughts is important to kind of understand where are things coming from. And we're all going to have them. We're always going to have our thoughts. We just don't want to judge them. And we want to stay objective and make sure we don't go down rabbit holes of negative self-talk when we're experiencing some of those things.
Yeah, all of these are so important on that journey, because there's going to be moments when maybe you want to quit, or maybe you want to give up, or maybe you see someone who's doing better than you. And when someone's doing worse than you can say, I'm glad I'm not that person. And all of these things are maybe just, creating an environment within you that might be hard to navigate. But one of the reasons why I love to have coaches like yourself, Allyson, come on is because you help people navigate through those challenging moments in their life, whether they have no know-how and to where they want to go or what to do. And, to the person who knows what they want, but they just need a little bit of guidance. They need to have those railroad tracks of saying, okay, like this is the goal, this is the destination, please help me get there. And all of these things that we talked about are going to be, something that anyone can be dealing with at any given time, because just because when you're young, you're maybe living in a certain lifestyle doesn't mean a couple years later, you're not in a different situation. And you can be any age. You can have maybe a brother, sister, mother, dad, or whatever. And you're like, okay, they're changing. They need some help. Why not be that person that gets the knowledge and is also that person that's like, hey, I'm going to walk first. I'm going to, start to focus on my nutrition and my diet. And you start doing that, and people around you, because they say you are the proponent of the people that you are around the most. And I can just imagine a family where one person says, okay, I'm going to make some change. And then everyone else starts to get some more steps in. They start to eat more vegetables, more fiber in their day. And it just starts by someone saying, why not me first? So if that is you, right? If that is percolate, like in your mind, it's like percolating in your mind, like, why not me? Like maybe I should try, reaching out to Allyson is definitely going to be one of the benefits of today's episode, because you're going to say, let me figure out where I need to go. Or if you're completely lost, let me figure out what I've been doing so I can know that, hey, let me start to avoid those things more. And so as we begin to wrap up, Allyson, I would love to get some final words, some final thoughts, and then please tell everyone how they can find you, reach out, and begin working with you.
Yeah, thank you so much just for having me on. This has been wonderful. And I would say my biggest point for people to remember is just that it doesn't have to be so hard. And if anyone wants to reach out for one-on-one coaching, I have a 45-minute free call where we can just meet each other, see if it's something you're interested in. You kind of share with me if you have any challenges that you're looking for guidance on. In addition to that, I also do have a blog on my website, which is www.allysoncoaches.com, Allyson with 2 L's and a Y. And that has some free resources built into the blog too, depending on what link you click on.
And I was just looking at your name too. I was like, she has such a unique spelling of her name, and we're going to make it easy for everyone. You don't have to worry about the spelling. The link is just right down below. So check out her website, check out her blogs, learn more about what she's doing, sign up for a consultation. When it comes to your health in your life, most people, they focus on their health in their life when they get that doctor's note. The doctor says, oh, you better start to change some things before things go awry. And I remember when I was 24, around that 24 time. And I went to the doctor and he did all these tests on me. He goes, my cholesterol is high because I was eating too much rice. And he was like, you're eating too much rice. And it's going back to what I was saying. I'll eat all this rice and then it'll be all these problems. So then now rice and me are not friends. So we're friends, but it's just like we're secret lovers. So I have to have it sometimes. But
fair enough.
I've learned what works for me. And I encourage you to figure out what works for you. And I know Allyson is going to be able to help you, guide you, and then be that coach that's going to keep you going on to that person that you're dreaming of, because they're out there, they're underneath that negative veil that you're giving yourself right now, whether it be you're too much or you're too little. Why not be just right? So reach out to Allyson. The link is down below again. Thank you, Allyson, for coming on and talking about your work today.
Thank you so much.